Namaskar. We have to discuss the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code today. This is one of the deepest economic reforms which has taken place in the recent times, just next to the GST reform which is there. So we'll just discuss in detail as to what was the need for the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, how it came about, what was the nuances of the code, how the infrastructure was created, and what are the outcomes we have got in terms of the miracle which IBC has been able to achieve in a short period of something like 5 years. So just to move on, I have prepared a small PowerPoint presentation for the same thing. If we get into details as to just to understand what is insolvency, what is bankruptcy, what is liquidation. Insolvency basically is the inability of a person to repay its debts on time. So if he doesn't have the cash flows, a person or a company, that is, he is treated as an insolvent. So he would have taken some debt from the market, he would have purchased some materials, but he is not able to repay those monies. So it is called as an insolvent person. Likewise, we have a bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is more for an individual level, wherein a person is not able to repay again the debt which he has taken, or the kind of purchases which he has made, he is not able to repay with those kind of monies on time. So that is called as the bankruptcy. And liquidation is wherein we actually end up killing a particular unit by closing it down, by stripping off the assets, by selling off the assets and totally closing down the unit. So that is what we call as by the word liquidation. And code is basically a compilation of various kind of laws which have been there in vogue at a particular point of time, and those are put down across together to arrive at a code. So this is little more than a particular law. Moving on, it's not that the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was the very first of its kind in the country. For the last more than 100 years also, we had similar kind of regulations which were there, of course with different nuances, and they had problems, so they could not be implemented. They could not give the desired results. We had something called the Presidency Towns Insolvency Act 1909, followed by Provincial Insolvency Act 1920. These were very old acts and prior to the British, the independence in the British Raj. And then we followed with the Sikh Industries Company Act, that was in 1985. Sikh Industries Company Act was to resolve the assets to get recoveries for the banks and financial institutions from companies which become sick. They are not able to repay the debts which they have borrowed from the lending institutions. However, this was not very successful, so it moved on to the RDDBI, which is Resolution Recovery of Debt from Banks and Financial Institutions. This was in 1993. However, this act also was not very successful in meeting its ends, though some success was achieved. However, the kind of expectations which were there, they were not being able to met. We then moved on to SARFAESI, that is Securitization and Asset Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest. This was in 2002. This was a good kind of a thing which came about, but it also led to some problems in the sense it was supposed to be very lenders kind of pro lenders. So it did not take care much interest of the borrowers who were there. And also the act provided for the lenders of the charge, the lenders who are lending against the security of charged assets to enforce security, take over the charged assets, dispose them off and recover their monies. So in all these things were really bothered or concentrated more about recovery of monies for the banks and institutions rather than resolution of the assets. For the first time, the IBC in 2016 which came about was more concerned about the resolution of financial assets. As we are aware, if we are setting up a big plant, a power plant say for 50,000 crore rupees in the country, if it is not able to do well because of whatever reasons, and we have to sell it off, we have to liquidate the assets, we have to close it down, then the monies which the banks or institutions who have lent against those assets, what they will be recovering is maybe 5 to 10% of the monies which they have invested. So maybe against 50,000 crore of investments, we will be getting some 5,000 crore. That also after a lengthy litigation kind of a process and after too many delays. But for the first time, IBC was introduced, that is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, wherein the attempt was to resolve those assets. When we know India being a relatively emerging economy has invested 50,000 crore rupees in a particular asset, we want it to generate good cash flows for the economy. We want it to generate profits for the benefit of everyone, and it should not get closed down. Because closing down not only leads to killing of the capital, leads to losses for the economy, leads to decline the GDP growth, but also leads to loss of employment which has been created. So those kind of jobs are lost, families are ruined, the entire logistics value chain, the suppliers, vendors and all, so many people who are dependent upon a particular project, they are actually losing their livelihoods. So the attempt of the code is not to really recover. The first and foremost attempt of the code is to resolve the assets so that we are able to recover the monies at a second stage, but as a going concern we should be able to resolve the assets so that people do not lose jobs and the economic assets which are created lead to good kind of a contribution to the GDP and growth and prosperity of the nation. Moving forward, what was the need for this particular code to come about? If we see in the scenario which was prevailing in 2016, we had something called a twin balance sheet problem. That is, the banks have lent in large kind of amounts of money to many promoters, companies, managements. So these promoters and companies, they are not able to do well, they are not able to generate enough cash flows to service the debts, and accordingly their loans are becoming NPAs in the banks. Similarly, the banks who have lent money to these kind of promoters and companies, their balance sheets also become strained because they are having large NPAs. So it is the twin balance sheet problem. The balance sheet of the companies is bad, the balance sheet of the banks who have lent to such companies also is bad. It was, the markets were not very well developed, for the bond markets were not very well developed. So the promoters and managements and companies were more dependent upon the financial banks and institutions to borrow monies. They could not borrow it from the capital markets because of the underdevelopment in the bond markets. Next issue was the poor credit growth. In the sense, credit growth was taking place, but it was not going to the right sectors. It was an imbalanced kind of a growth which was happening at that point of time, and because of which certain capacities were created in certain sectors where it was not really required, which led to overcapacity, underutilization, and the efficiencies were poor. So accordingly, the cash flows which are expected to be generated from these assets could not be generated and they could not service the debts. Last but not the least was the lack of credit support for startups. India is a developing country, emerging economy, wherein we are the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, and for that we require large amounts of money coming forward. That is one of the most important kind of things for growth of the startups in the country, easy availability of credit. So those monies were not coming because the banks did not want to lend to such kind of startups and all, fearing that their monies may not come back. It is more of a gamble is what they used to think, wherein once the company is set up, it will be very difficult to exit from such companies. So the IBC has brought in something called as the ease of exit. If we get into the past, we had 1990s wherein the ease of exit entry was not there in the system. We had permits, we had licenses, we had Inspector Raj. That was done away with by way of reforms which happened in the decade 1990 onwards, and we had a freedom of entry. In the 2000s, we had competition which was made freely available. It was a free and fair market economy by way of setting up the Competition Commission of India, and in 2000 onwards, what was happening was the promoters can enter, set up a company, grow the company and prosper, but still they had problems with exit. Moving forward in 2016, once the IBC has come in place, we have this freedom of exit also. So wherein a startup company can be set up, and if required, the promoters of the company, if because of whatever reasons they find it is not possible for them, they are not happy with the growth of the company, they are not able to generate enough cash flows, maybe because of technology, maybe because of imbalances, maybe because of competition and all, they can easily exit from such companies. So that gives a lot of comfort for the economy, for the stakeholders, for the promoters of the companies, for the banking system and all, and for the overseas investors also to invest in a country like India. Moving forward, in 2016, what the culture which was prevailing was that the people used to borrow monies from the banking system and with not much of a pressure to repay it back. The promoters of the companies had a lot of cash flows to pay. They could service the debt which they have obtained from the banking system, but there was no willingness to pay back those monies. So that was the kind of a moral hazard payment culture which was prevailing at that point of time. So just to give them numbers and all, in 2002 we had willful defaulters of 6,000 crore, which has gone up by more than 16 times to around 1 lakh crore in FY 2017. So that is the kind of willful defaults which used to happen in the system, because the promoters were really kind of happy and satisfied that they taken the money from the banking system and they need not to pay it back. That was the kind of a culture which was prevailing in 2016. This is of course the evolution of the code which we already discussed, right from Tiwari Committee's recommendations which led to SICA in 1985, Narasimhan Committee first recommendation which led to RDDBFI, and Narasimhan Committee 2 recommendations which led to SARFAESI Act, followed by the BLRC report, that is a Bankruptcy Law Reforms Committee which was set up by the Government of India in 2015, which led to enactment of the code in 2016. So key features of the code, if we get into in detail, this is applicable to both the corporate and the non-corporate persons. It allows the creditors, whether secured or unsecured, financial or operational, that is the people who are supplying materials or utility or services, they are called as operational creditors, national, domestic or international, to initiate a resolution process and aims at early detection of frauds, etc. So not only does it get into resolution process, but it also aims at detection of frauds or avoidance transactions, which we call as part of the IBC parlance. There is a time bound process and there is a moratorium. So once the IBC is put through, that is the corporate insolvency resolution process is started, thereafter there is a moratorium period which comes into play. During the moratorium period, the existing lenders, they cannot enforce their claims. Lot of other kind of standstill clauses are there, wherein the utility services, the other kind of urgent requirements as a going concern, they get into the system and they are continued, so that a person is able to resolve the insolvency and we can get better resolution plans as part of the entire process. The resolution professionals can replace the existing management during the insolvency proceedings. So what really happens is, if I am a promoter of the company, I default, then any of my kind of lenders or operational creditors, they can take me to IBC through a corporate insolvency resolution process, and a resolution professional would be appointed and he will be basically taking over the management of the company, and I as a promoter may actually lose control of the company forever. Even if through the back door and all I want to enter, that may not be possible. So IBC has become a very big credible deterrent for the people not to default. That is the kind of a behavioral change which IBC has brought about in the promoters of the country, wherein they do not want to default under any circumstances, knowing fully well in case they default, there is a high degree of likelihood that they may lose control on their company, on their unit, on their firm forever. So as a credible deterrent, the IBC has helped in resolution of the so many units, not only because of the code but outside the code also. At a rough estimate, more than 5 lakh crore rupees have been resolved outside the code, and over 2 lakh crore rupees have been resolved by way of implementation of the IBC by going through the CIRP processes. So what we feel is the best use of the code is not to use the code at all. That is the kind of a deterrent which we are trying to create in the economy, wherein people themselves become obedient, they themselves become law abiding kind of people, and they service their debt on time, they service their whatever they have to pay back to various suppliers or to the creditors on time without any delays. And in the event they are not able to pay back, it will be possible and it will be useful to close down such units at the minimum kind of a time frame, so that these kind of resources are made available to the economy for further channelization for better purposes. An inability to pay debt will no more be a ground for winding up of a unit in the Companies Act. Earlier what used to happen was the important thing for the people was more of recovery rather than resolution. So any unit which is not doing well, which gets into problems, which is not able to repay its debt and all, it will be better to close down the unit and wind it up and then sell off the assets basically as a scrap, and getting literally no value or maybe some value of 5, 10%, 15%, that also after long drawn litigations and long expenditure, higher expenditure to be spent onto these kind of processes. Voluntary liquidation is also allowed as part of the code, wherein if a unit is not doing well, more so in the startup ecosystem, they can decide to close it down themselves, and with minimal kind of requirements or obligations, it is possible under the code. That is the freedom of exit is what we were discussing earlier. Moving on, this I think we will skip quickly. This also is more of a theoretical thing, so we will just skip. So in terms of the regulator for this particular code, the entire ecosystem which is developing, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India is the regulator, and it's a peculiar kind of a regulator because not only it regulates the market participants, it also lays down the rules of the game. So it also develops and puts on the regulations. We regulate insolvency professional agencies, we regulate insolvency professionals, and we regulate the information utilities, beyond which we are also the frontline regulators for the registered valuers. We register the valuers and we also regulate them as a frontline regulator. In terms of adjudicator, this is another kind of a strong pillar of the entire ecosystem, wherein we have NCLTs and NCLATs and the debt recovery tribunals. So these are the various processes which get into the entire resolution process. Not going into much details because of the short time frame. The default, if that is more than 1 crore, then this IBC can come into play. Anyone whose the default is there, they can be taken to IBC if the default is more than 1 crore as of now. And there is a complete process in terms of appointment of insolvency professionals, formation of the committee of creditors, which basically contains the financial creditors and sometimes operational creditors also. Appointment of valuers to value the assets which are there for the company or the unit. Then there is a forensic review which is carried out to understand if there is any avoidance transactions, that is the PUFE transactions, whether any frauds have been committed, any kind of siphoning of the funds are there, or there are some kind of extortionate transactions which have taken place in the unit. Preparation of the information memorandum. That information memorandum is more like an invitation to the entire kind of a resource persons in the country to come and maybe volunteer to resolve that particular asset. So they can probably quote some amounts depending upon their own understanding in terms of the information memorandum which is made available. So they will see value in the company. Everything would be transparently disclosed, and the new kind of management will come in, take over the unit, and there will be prevention of loss of jobs, and the entire infrastructure which has been created in terms of land, buildings, the machinery which is there, etc., that will be continued as a going concern. Receipt of resolution plan from the resolution applicants. Approval by the COC, that is the committee of creditors, takes a complete commercial decision based on their understanding of the unit, the kind of resolution plans which are received, and to understand whether that is possible to go on as a long-term sustainable basis. These plans are then submitted to the adjudicating authority, who may approve them, and once it is approved, the plan becomes binding to all the stakeholders for that particular unit. If the plan is not approved, then the unit goes into liquidation, and there is no alternative but to kind of close down the company and liquidate the assets and get back the money in the system quickly. So there is a time frame also for each of these processes which is mentioned. Earlier, the lacunae in the earlier kind of a legislation which used to be there, one major thing was, the flaw was the time frame. There was no timeliness. In fact, most of the time what we used to see was the kind of times which are not there. There was no emphasis on time. So it was more friendly to the promoters of the companies, the managements of the companies, who used to take shelter under these kind of legislations and habitually delay the whole process, strip the assets also sometimes. Of course, it is not there in all the cases, but certain of the unscrupulous borrowers will strip off the assets, they will remove the assets and all, and what will be remaining majorly is the shed of the factory and the land beneath the shed. So that may be the only thing which will be available to the financial creditors. So there is a process in terms of timeliness which also is very important. So in terms of numbers and all, if we see, earlier the processes for recovery or for resolution of the assets or for closing down liquidation of the assets used to take something like 5, 10, 15 years also sometime, but now the times have come down at a very low level comparatively. The strategy of the code, if we want to discuss, these are 5 broad parameters. The code has strong focus on default prevention. As I was mentioning, it's a credible deterrent for unscrupulous borrowers who default. So now, under whatever circumstances, if it is possible, the borrower would not want to default because the fear of losing control on the company is there. So the borrowers will not default. Proactively, they will come back to the lenders and say that we are likely to default, so please give us some time frame, rather than the lenders running after the borrowers. So the paradigm shift which has taken place is that the defaulters' paradise is lost. They are no longer having a paradise wherein they will want to default and get away with those kind of things for a number of years. The code envisages market mechanism. Everything is decided by the market, compared to the earlier times where the state used to decide the fate of a particular firm. Now it's a market who decides whether a company would continue to work, continue to operate, or it will die, or it can be closed down. The code facilitates creative destruction. As I was mentioning, in terms of the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, in case a company is not able to do well because of whatever reasons, then the code facilitates a creative destruction with the ease of exit which is put into place. A company can exit, the promoters can exit in a very honorable kind of fashion. The code promotes resolution over liquidation. So here the concept which we are utilizing is, in case the units which are viable, it will be better to resolve those assets rather than destroy those assets for the benefit of the economy, for the benefit of the ecosystem, for the benefit of the employees of the company and the entire people and the eco chain who are dependent upon a unit. So for viable units, because they are not able to service the debt because of certain reasons, the management failure or such other things, it will be better to resolve such assets. So that is the first and foremost priority of the code. However, in the circumstances where it is not possible, the company is not at all viable, it will be better to close down such units and liquidate those assets in a very timely manner so that we are able to get back the monies in the system. The code promotes entrepreneurship because obviously as a new promoter and all, if I have ease of entry, I have ease of fair competition, prosperity, progress and also the ease of exit, I will be much more inclined to set up a unit and test my entrepreneurship skills. The code has strong focus on default prevention, which already we discussed in terms of the credible deterrent which the code has provided. The stakeholders of the ecosystem are the code, of course, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, the insolvency professional agencies, the debtors and creditors, adjudicating authorities which is the NCLT, NCLAT, debt recovery tribunals and the resolution applicants. These are predominantly the stakeholders which are there for the code. In terms of the institutional infrastructure, what we have in place is NCLTs were constituted in June 2016. Excuse me. Establishment of IBBI in October 16. That is 5 years we are going to complete in this year October. And we have large number of service providers who are also there as part of the value chain, wherein we have insolvency professionals, we have professional entities, we have professional agencies, information utility, registered values and registered value organizations. So these entirely some of the kind of infrastructure we have in place. We just to discuss on the information utility, which is a novel concept in the country. Probably in the globe itself this kind of a concept is not there, wherein this utility company has been set up. It kind of is a certification agency between the borrowers and the lenders, wherein any borrower who has taken the loan, that will be confirmed by the borrower as also the lender, and that becomes the specific information which can be utilized as part of the proceedings under the IBC. The salient outcomes, which is the kind of miracle, is what I have been talking in terms of the code having been able to achieve in the last around 5 years. If we see this graph, these are the details, numbers which we have taken from the Reserve Bank of India. The details are given is in terms of the non-performing assets of the banking system in the country, which used to hover at around 2.3%, 2.4% and all. But in 2015-16, if we see, there is a sudden spike from 4% to around 9%. And thereafter, because of the scenario which I discussed in the some time back, the scenario which was prevailing, the NPAs have spiked up to something like 11.5% in 2017-18. And those numbers pursuant to implementation of the code, because of the resolutions, recoveries and also the credible deterrent in terms of resolutions happening outside the code, has resulted in the tapering down of the NPA levels. And it's a gradual kind of a movement right from 11.5% to 7.5% in 2020 September, which is the latest data which was available. So the expectation is that because of the COVID and all, numbers may increase, but they may again come down because of the kind of implementation of the code which we have been doing and in a very swift manner. In fact, World Bank also, they have been promoting and appreciating the kind of efforts which IBC has taken in terms of implementation, swift implementation, the infrastructure which has been created, and the kind of results which we have been able to achieve in the last around 5 years. So what the World Bank Doing Business Report 2020 says, with the reorganization procedure available through the IBC, companies now have effective tools to restore financial viability, and the creditors, which is the banks and institutions, they have access to better tools to successfully negotiate and have greater chances to revert the money loaned at the insolvency proceedings. So this is the kind of a change which has been brought about. In terms of recoveries, though recovery is more of an incidental kind of a product outcome of the entire IBC process, what is happening is, if we see in this slide, the recoveries in the earlier years, if we see from Lok Adalats, DRTs or SARFAESI, etc., the recoveries are very low. If the bank has loaned 100 rupees, they used to get something like 7 rupees, 24 rupees, 4 rupees, etc. That also, after a prolonged legal battle, spending a lot of money and time and energy, and productive assets used to languish in the system. Pursuant to IBC, the recoveries have also improved to around 49%, 50%, and also the time taken for these recoveries are very small. We are now around 400 days is the average kind of a time which is being taken for recoveries through resolutions, and the recoveries are very high. The kind of expenses which are there for such recoveries are also very, very low. It is something like less than 1% compared to maybe 10 to 15% also sometimes in the earlier kind of legislations which used to be there. And also the absolute numbers of recovery. Last year, as per Reserve Bank of India 2019-20, under IBC mechanism, we were able to recover more than 1 lakh crore of rupees in the banking system, compared to the nearest competitor, the SARFAESI Act, which was around 53 lakh crore. 53,000 crore, sorry. In terms of achievements, what we have been able to achieve, behavioral change is the most important kind of a thing, wherein, as I mentioned, the best part of the code is not to use the code at all. We are not a votary for using the code. The people should be sensitive enough, the borrower should be sensitive enough, they should not default, because in case they default, there is a high degree of possibility they may end up losing the unit which they have nurtured for the last so many years and brought it to this kind of a position. So more than 50% of the cases which are coming as part of the IBC CIRP processes are settled much before the admission in the NCLT. India's rankings have improved huge lot. In fact, this is little unprecedented in the entire globe, wherein the ease of doing business ranking for the country, which are done by the World Bank every year, it improved from 130 in 2016 to 63 now. This kind of an improvement has been not there in any other country, in any other kind of a banking system, in the economy. India has also been awarded the Global Restructuring Review Award for the most improved jurisdiction. India has been receiving very many awards, but this is probably one of the awards where we have been ranked the first in the world in terms of the restructuring review for most improved jurisdiction in terms of the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Plus the recent trends and the progress banking report of the Reserve Bank of India, which I was mentioning, it has highlighted IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, as a dominant mode of recovery for 2019-20. So these are the kind of achievements which the code has been able to bring about in the economy in a short period of time. Plus that credible deterrent is working. People now do not want to default. They want to settle their defaults or problems outside the code if it is possible, and if it is not possible, they will get into the code and try to get the resolution as early as possible. So with these kind of improvements only, the World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, as also the World Bank the Insolvency Index reports, there is a huge quantum jump in terms of rankings of the country. So those have been carried out. And in terms of next big things, what we are proposing is individual insolvency going forward in a big way, cross-border insolvency and group insolvency. These are the three things which, as the things mature, as we also develop, we carry out these things also, and we bring these three in the ecosystem in terms of further improvements in the insolvency and bankruptcy ecosystem in the country. Thank you so much.